Some of the coolest features that primates come equipped with are our super strong grip strength, allowing us to climb up branches, our very fine motor control of our fingers, allowing us to manipulate small objects, and a super enhanced sense of touch, which allows us to feel our way around our environment. And if you look at our hands and our feet, you'll see a lot of really cool adaptations that allow those things to happen. Things like our opposable thumbs, which allow us to grasp onto things really well, or the dermal ridges or prints on your fingers and toes that allow you to pack in as many little nerve endings as possible and also add some really good grip strength, some friction. And our fingernails, which do three main things. Number one, they protect your fingers a little bit. That's super cool. They also allow you to pick up very small objects, things that you can only really get a pinch on. And finally, they spread out the force that's applied to the front of your fingers, which allows you to grip and climb better. The reason why I'm not squishing into my finger meat right now is because I've got this great big broad hard flat thing here spreading out the force applied. It's just physics. This is a fantastic question because you're absolutely right. Atoms never really actually touch. Atoms are surrounded by electrons. Electrons are negatively charged. Like charges repel each other. So when you have these electrons over here and these electrons over here coming close together, those repulsive charges stop them from ever making actual real contact. Unless they're moving so fast or with such great energy that they overcome the strong nuclear force and they fuse together, and that's called nuclear fusion, blah, blah, blah. In every normal day-to-day life, you never touch anything. You don't touch your clothes, you don't touch your desk, you don't touch your chair, you don't touch your friend. Nothing ever actually touches. What you feel is those repulsions becoming so strong that they deform mechanoreceptors on your cells that send a signal to your brain saying, hey, I'm feeling a thing. This is weird and strange, and it makes you rethink everything, but the science that makes you question reality is the best kind of science. So thank you so much for asking this question. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Tell me something that is totally normal, but seems completely unacceptable.
I've never been able to understand the way that people can accept believing in something based on faith. Faith is not a good thing. Faith is not a virtue. Faith is the excuse that someone gives for believing in something when they have no good reason for believing in it. Because if they had a good reason for believing in it, they wouldn't have faith. They would have proof. They would have evidence. Either evidence for something's existence exists or it doesn't. There is no middle ground there. And the absence of evidence is not the same thing as the evidence of absence. Just because I can't prove that something does exist doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't. But what you don't get to do is flip that around backwards and say, you can't prove that it doesn't exist, therefore I'm going to assume that it does. That's not logic. That's what crazy people do. If I tell you I have a magic goblin living in my closet that disappears whenever anybody looks for it, you can't prove that that's not real. But are you going to believe it though? Like, I don't have my own reality. I just live in reality. This is a great question because it's really important to remember that there isn't like a predetermined set of every possible animal that evolution just rummages through and pulls something out of every now and then. Evolution happens because there's selective pressure for the adaptations that are occurring. So for example, with the saber-toothed cats, having those great big long incisors gave them an advantage in their ecosystem. That's why they evolved over the course of millions of years. But at the end of the Pleistocene, they weren't really helping anybody anymore, and they kind of just got in the way, and so those saber-toothed cats died off. If they were ever to evolve again, they wouldn't be the same. They would be totally different cats evolving in a totally different way and having a similar adaptation, but they wouldn't be just the same saber-toothed cats having an encore on Earth. Saber teeth have evolved a lot of different times whenever they were useful, like the Gorgonopsid, which had saber teeth way before there were ever mammals, or the musk deer, which is still alive today, or even the saber-toothed salmon, which lived during the Ice Age up in Oregon. But for them to evolve today, there has to be selection pressure. One question that I get asked quite a bit is, are aliens real? And while I have no reason to believe that aliens exist with us here on this planet, I am absolutely certain that aliens exist in great abundance somewhere in this universe. I mean, think for just 1 second about how big this place really is. We're on one planet out of 8 in this solar system. And that's not even talking about the things that aren't planets, like Enceladus and Europa, which could very well support life. We're orbiting one star out of 100 billion stars in this galaxy. If 1% of those had a planet that could support life, we're talking about millions and millions of different planets that could have things wiggling around on them right now. And that's just one galaxy out of trillions and trillions of possible galaxies, which brings us to the Fermi paradox, which simply put just says, where are all the aliens? There's no way that we're alone in this universe, but as it stands right now, we are very much alone. I'm sure that this comment is a joke, but unfortunately there are a lot of ideas like this that are being thrown around unironically nowadays, and the problem with them is that they are unfalsifiable claims. Falsifiability is a central tenet of science. It means that given sufficient evidence, we can disprove an idea and all change our minds. So like cell theory, for example, if I could find one single piece of evidence that there was an organism that wasn't made of one or more cells, then cell theory goes out the window. All of biology fundamentally changes. But with the simulation thing, even if you woke up from the simulation, who's to say what you woke up into wasn't just another part of the simulation? Same thing with the idea that you're just a brain in a jar being fed chemicals to make you think that you're feeling things, or the whole cosmos just popped into existence, equipped with things that make it look like it didn't, but we'll never know which one's really true. You can never prove these things right or wrong, so there's no reason wasting your brain power thinking about them. Just focus on reality.
You only see the edge right now. You only see the light when
There are two different demonstrations going on here, and even though they look pretty similar at the beginning, the end result and the science behind them are pretty different, so let's try to break them both down individually. First of all, this is an orange. An orange is a berry. If you didn't know that an orange is a berry, it's okay. Just go back to my channel and look for a video called What is a Fruit? It'll explain everything. This type of berry is called a hesperidium, which means it's got this big, thick, leathery rind around the outside that is packed to the brim with sweet-smelling aromatic compounds. And those are what we're seeing playing out here. First, you squeeze the orange rind next to a fire and you make little sparkles. That happens because the outermost part of the orange part of the orange, or what we call the flavido, is full of essential oils. And when you squeeze those out, they burst out into the fire and they immediately just explode in flames, and that makes your beautiful little sparkles. The second thing is popping the balloon. What's going on there? You have another chemical in the rind here called limonene, which is a non-polar hydrocarbon just like latex. So when the two interact, they literally dissolve each other and that pops the balloon.
Men should not paint their nails. And the reason I say that is because it leads to other feminine things.
Let's take a minute to talk about why this argument makes no sense. First of all, just turn the whole thing upside down for a second. Imagine that this is a man, and he's sitting in his car and he's waggling a sandwich, and he says that women should not be wearing jeans, because that will lead them to more masculine things. Would that argument carry any weight with you at all? Second of all, gender norms are social constructs. There's nothing biological about them. I don't have any deep-seated inherent instincts that tell me not to wear fingernail polish in a dress. The only reason that I don't do those things is because they sound really uncomfortable and I just don't want to. My fiance, who's a mechanical engineer, also doesn't do those things. And if you ask her why, she'll give the exact same reason. But what really sticks out to me about this is if your masculinity, whatever that means, is so fragile that it can be eroded away from you just by getting some paint on your fingers, your male identity must be hanging on by a thread. Any motion whatsoever can be quantified as y over x, or distance over time. If I were to walk across the room, for example, I would be covering a certain amount of distance, and it would take me a certain amount of time to get there. And both of those measurements can be cut in half, like y over 2 over x over 2, halfway across the room in half the amount of time. Those are smaller numbers, but they're still real numbers, and they still have real bearing on reality. And I can cut those in half as well. So like y over 4 over x over 4, a quarter of the room, a quarter of the time, very small little numbers, but we're talking about real distances and a real amount of time. And I can cut those in half too, and then those, and then those, and then those, and then those, all the way down to y over infinity over x over infinity. An infinite amount of distance, an infinite amount of time. Very, very small little pieces, but real little pieces, real numbers. Mathematically speaking, no movement should be possible. Have fun sleeping.